FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz, and today is February 7th, 2020. And the months are just flying by. But I'll tell you what's not flying by. If you're a student, a college student, and you've taken on debt, and then you have to pay it back upon graduation, time moves very, very slowly when you're paying off a substantial part of your income for a degree that who knows whether it had much value or not. Certainly some do and some don't. Well, hey, it's a big, important issue. We're up to $1.6 trillion. That well exceeds the definition of a debt bubble. And 85% of the students attending college now are in hock up to their eyeballs and will be for a large chunk of their lives. So we got to find a solution to this. Recently, I was reading an article by a person by the name of George Leef, who you're going to hear about. He is the director of editorial content at the James G. Martin Center, which really covers all of these. It's the James G. Martin Center for Academic Renewal, and it really covers these issues as well as many other issues that plague so-called higher education. And George, we're really thrilled to have you on here. Hey, I was fortunate. I graduated college in 1981. My total college bill was, not including cost of living and all that, but it was about $13,000. Then I went to law school, and that was like another $15,000. So I never had to deal with it because I was able to start working and make back my investment, my education, literally in just under a year. But it isn't so simple anymore, is it?
No. Oh, I'm a little older than you are. When I went to college, I didn't need to borrow any money. My parents were able to afford the fairly low tuition for a modest liberal arts college back then. And then I went to law school like you. And even a prestige law school back when I went in the mid-'70s cost about $2,400 a year in tuition. It was Duke University. These days, however, going to a private undergraduate university or even more so a prestige law school costs far, far more than it did back then, adjusted for inflation. And the reason chiefly is this. The government has made it so easy for anybody to borrow large sums of money to go to college that the people who run colleges and universities, understanding that their customer base has much, much more money in their pocket spend than they otherwise would, have kept on increasing the cost of attending. They've increased tuition many, many fold. And of course, a lot of the money they spend now is on things that have nothing to do with academics whatsoever. The result has been we have a huge influx of people going to college because the government makes it easy to borrow this money. And it seems like it's the thing to do. You go to college, you get your degree, and supposedly that ensures you a comfortable living in the future. Well, people are now discovering that it doesn't ensure you anything. Many people with college degrees cannot find jobs that even come close to paying off what they owe. And the job markets are flooded with people who have a college credential. Nevertheless, people keep on borrowing huge amounts of money to go to law school, get their undergraduate degrees, but especially graduate school programs. They borrow huge amounts of money, get into debt they can't possibly afford to repay, and then they beg for forgiveness of their loans. They go to politicians like Bernie and Elizabeth Warren and say, oh, please let us out of our student loans. And the politicians are only too glad to buy votes that way. And sometimes they go into bankruptcy court, which is a case I wrote about that you happen to read about, a case where a fellow who had gotten some $220,000 in debt. He had a law degree, but wasn't practicing law. He wasn't able to finance the payments. And so the interest kept building up, $220,000 worth. And the bankruptcy judge said, well, I think these are working undue hardship on you, and that satisfies me that under the law, you're entitled to discharge. A lot of people think, oh, that's great. Now we can bail out these hapless students who are so deeply in debt they can't afford anything, can't afford a decent life. But the problem is, if we do that, that just means more people will accumulate debts they can't possibly repay. What we need to do is think about alternatives to the current system where the government loans money in huge amounts to anybody who wants to go to college.
Hey, I couldn't agree with you more. Problem here is way back when in the 70s, I believe there was a high-profile Reagan administration member who had gone bankrupt and discharged student loans, and there was an outrage in Congress, and they put up these barriers. It's not altogether impossible, but through case law, it's become all but impossible to discharge your student loan debts up until now. Maybe this will be the beginning of a trend. Problem here is there's several problems. Number one, why should college debts, student loan debts, be non-dischargeable? What is the reason for that? Maybe not in your first 3 to 5 years of graduating, but they should be dischargeable at some point. Why is this debt better than all the others? The only other debts that are non-dischargeable, there's a list of them, as you know, child support, somewhat alimony, couple of others, taxes. Well, there's preferences, and then there's non-dischargeability. But of all the debts in the world, college student loan debt really is in a class all by itself.
It's the hardest to discharge. And if college debts were made the same way other kind of debts are accumulated, where you go to a private lender who has his own funds at risk and say, will you lend me money? And that person can evaluate you and say yes or no. I'd say yes, it's perfectly fine to let college debt be dischargeable in bankruptcy just like any other kind of debt. The thing is, the loans are now made by the federal government, which says no to virtually nobody, and is not even playing with its own money, paying with the taxpayers' money. That's the thing that must change.
Yeah. Because look, the colleges have gamed the system, and now they have marketing departments. They're no different than GM or Microsoft or Google. They have marketing departments, and they basically seduce you with brochures on how great your life is going to be once you go to college, without any knowledge of who you are and whether you should be there in the first place. You might be better off as an air conditioner repair person, making six figures and starting your own business, or an electrician or a plumber. But instead, they seduce you with these visions of college. It's
they do, yeah. And once they have you, it really doesn't matter to the college whether you learn anything of value or not, because they're going to get paid. They'll get their tuition and fees paid. And of course, if the individual learns little or nothing, which is unfortunately true about many college students these days, that's going to be of any value, and cannot pay, it's no problem for the college. They've gotten their money. It's a problem for the individual who struggles with the accumulating debt. And of course, it eventually is a problem for the taxpayers when the debt is written off, and that just increases the national debt.
Yeah. So, and you look at this degree in puppetry or whatever, and then the people who aren't even suited to go to college, and they drop out after a year and a half, but they still owe that money. It doesn't go away just because you dropped out. And certainly giving the colleges some skin in the game here to more carefully screen their student body, because you see
more carefully screen them, and probably also change the curriculum.
Yes, for sure. And
probably do away with grade inflation that makes it so easy for students to coast through college, whether they're gaining any valuable skill and knowledge or not, and instead insist that if you want to stay on our campus, putting our own money at risk, because we'll have to pay off your loan if you default, they would probably raise their standards and make the curriculum more sensible.
Yeah. And that would go a long ways towards it. But you've got also these private colleges, and especially like there was a John Grisham book about for-profit law schools, and they take anybody, regardless how many schools they've been rejected for, no matter how low their scores are on the LSAT, and then they basically load them up with $250,000 worth of debt and say, go out and practice law.
Right. Those colleges have no skin in the game. They don't stand to lose anything by making bad admission decisions and encouraging people to go to college or law school who are very unlikely to be successful.
Yeah. Yeah. And so some assessment of the student coming in, it's not going to be 100%, but if you know that this person can barely read and has real challenges, maybe this is not the person you want to accept into your school, but it's in the college's interest to take everybody and let the natural selection work its charm, or inflate the grades away so nobody fails. Everybody gets a participation diploma degree.
Yes. And I think the root of this is the government doing something that it should never have started doing in the first place, which is lending money. If you read the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8 says nothing about Congress having any authority to lend money to anyone, not college students, not businesses, not foreigners. There's nothing about the government lending money. The founders understood that politicians are bad stewards of limited resources, the public fisc, and they didn't want them lending money. I think it's one of the biggest blunders the country's ever made. This is back during the LBJ's Great Society days, for the government to get into the business of financing college. We went from having relatively few people go to college, which didn't cost very much, and the people who did go went because they thought they really wanted to learn something valuable, to now where it's almost obligatory for everyone to go to college, and the government picks up the tab until you start having to pay back these huge loans. That's what needs to change. We need to get the government out of financing college, put it back in private hands.
Well, we'll have a major depression in the educational industrial complex because no one will be able to afford to go there. So we need to have it.
The creative destruction would work wonders in our bloated, overly expensive, and terribly inefficient higher ed sector.
I agree with you, but there's going to be a lot of pain here because the other thing is, I think you mentioned in the article, but it's been mentioned many times, they didn't even up it so more students could attend. They just, because all the money's coming in, they just raise the price and then inflate the salaries of the professors and the administrators, and they're getting they're really getting over.
Yeah, higher education is an incredibly bloated enterprise compared to what it was 50, 60 years ago. The professors teach much less than they used to. The students have an enormous smorgasbord of college courses to choose from, many of which are kind of frivolous, trendy joke courses. Grade inflation is pathetic. Students can get through with, an A- is now the modal grade, grade point average. So we have this incredibly expensive enterprise of college. Students go because it's expected that they must go and get their credential. They don't learn very much, and then they get off into the world and discover that they've been had. So I think that's what's got to change, because the financing mechanism has given us this incredibly costly and inefficient system.
Yeah, it certainly has. So on to the issue of your article, which was the whole concept of dischargeability in bankruptcy. Should we allow these kids to get discharged or not? A lot of times I feel like recently, and I hate to use I feel like the basis of a logical argument, but isn't it true that a lot of these kids have been conned? They've been told, yeah, you're going to make $1 million more during the course of your career if you go to college, and they've been sold a bill of goods. And they were enabled.
FM SN Radio. It's all about what's next.
Silver One Resources is an exploration and development company backed by strategic investors Eric Sprott and SSR Mining. The company is focused on its Candelaria mine project in Nevada, where there is already a historic resource estimated at 127 million ounces of silver. The Candelaria mine historically was the highest grade silver producer in Nevada, generating over 68 million ounces of silver at an amazing average production rate of over 1,250 grams per ton. The project has tremendous expansion potential as past drilling has outlined deeper, high-grade silver targets for future drill programs. Silver One is highly leveraged to the price of silver and is cashed up and poised to increase shareholder value. Silver One trades in New York under the ticker SLVRF and in Toronto under the ticker SVE. To learn more, go to silverone.com. That's silverone.com.
The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Colleges themselves are a little bit leery of making those kind of claims. It's the politicians who keep trotting out these ridiculous assertions about how important college is for everybody. Hillary Clinton used to go around saying, oh, yes, college guarantees you $1 million extra per year. Well, she wants people to go to college. It makes politicians seem like they care. But in point of fact, I think most colleges have become relatively careless or careful about making claims that they can't possibly back up. They're not telling people, oh, you will make $1 million. They just make it seem as though having a college credential from them is going to make a big difference. But they're not making claims that will land them in court for fraud.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, but the kids have been sold a bill of goods by the entire system. And
the entire system has done it, yes.
Yeah. So don't they deserve some consideration here? I heard one person, I thought it was the best plan I had encountered, is let's get rid of the interest, because the interest you wind up paying many times more than the actual principal of the loan, especially if you go into default. Then it goes into default interest. You wind up owing 5 times more than you ever borrowed. And
yeah,
you know, it's unfair. They seize your income tax returns, all these things.
Yeah. That's there are a lot of sob stories out there about people who have gotten themselves way too deeply in debt, and maybe we should let those people out. But what we also should do is not continue the system that encourages that to happen. I don't mind if Mr. Rosenberg, he was the plaintiff in the case, gets out of his $220,000. I don't want more Rosenberg cases eventuating, though, which I'm afraid is going to happen now that we are encouraging students to try bankruptcy, but still lending them vast amounts of money to go to law school or undertake other programs that are likely to be failures for them.
Yeah. So there needs to be some personal accountability, but there needs to be I shudder to say it, some compassion about the situation they're in, because it's kind of like, to me, these student loans, it's like you go to the casino with your rich uncle and you start betting, and he just covers all your losses, and he keeps covering it and covering it, till finally he has to go bankrupt. And that's where we're kind of at with the student loan program, 1.6 trillion with no end in sight, and they're all direct loans. There's no underwriting.
That's a good way to look at it. Yes.
Yeah. And so we've got to do something here. So we have to stop it. But that's going to cause...
I'd like to stop it. I'd like to go cold turkey, but that's not likely to happen. I think as the first step toward getting the government out of financing, what we need to do is tell the colleges that they're going to be on the hook for some percentage. What percentage that is, I don't know. Maybe 50%, perhaps.
It's got to be enough to hurt.
Some percentage, at least, of the loss if the student who they have purported to educate cannot repay the loans. So then they will become more careful about who they admit and how they educate.
Yeah, exactly. And that would be a good thing, wouldn't it?
That would be a sea change. As it is, colleges can admit the most pathetic student they can lure in. Back in my own teaching days, I saw kids like this. They could barely read and write, and they should have been back in about 4th grade. But there they were in college, probably spending mom and dad's money, but also racking up debt, when they should have been off learning how to fix air conditioners or repair engines or do something useful. But we convinced a huge number of people that college is the way to go, and you'll never amount to anything unless you have a college degree. It wasn't true back 30 years ago. It's certainly not true today, and we've got to stop this wasteful system of luring people into college with federal money.
Agreed. I mean, look, some of the most successful people I know have actually not gone to college or went to I should say they went to college and succeeded in spite of it. College really teaches a lot of groupthink and a lot of unoriginal material now that really doesn't help you get ahead, like puppetry. Who needs a master's degree in puppetry? If you want to get one and you want to pay for it, great, go ahead. More power to you. But
yes, if that's what interests you and you can pay for it, go ahead. But I think we've got to stop this notion that the government is there to make higher education accessible for everyone. Well, not everyone should go. And by making it seem that everyone should go, we've simply lowered the standards and increased the cost.
Exactly. And it's the exact same thing that they've done off topic, but exactly what they've done with home ownership and real estate.
Yeah.
You need to own a house, whether there are people who shouldn't own houses that shouldn't own their own home. They're called renters. And we've stigmatized the idea of renting your own home in pursuit of this policy of full home ownership and enriching the real estate sector. It is an important sector. And we've done exactly the same thing with loans as well.
Yes. You couldn't be more correct on that, Kerry. And again, it's government. It's politicians wanting to appear compassionate and wanting to appear that they're solving some problem. And in point of fact, they're just playing with other people's money and causing huge distortions in the marketplace.
Exactly. Now I have a question for you. Let's go back and let's say there were no student loans. There was no third-party financing of education. How much do you think a year at Harvard would cost?
In 1966, I know this I looked at this statistic not too long ago. In 1966, a year at Harvard cost $1,200.
And that was a lot of money.
If you adjust that for inflation today, it'd be about $8,000.
Right.
And what is the actual cost today? About $58,000, something like that.
Right.
So the cost has ballooned enormously. And that's because the government makes it so easy. And also because politicians have helped to sell this idea that you must have a college degree.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. And one thing, I'm sure you've looked at this site that's up now. It's called collegescorecard.ed.
Yeah.
Gov. It is fascinating because you put in the name of a college and it tells you what percentage of the alumni is in default. It tells you how much their average income is. One of the things, there's a guy who has a thing called the collegeinvestor.com, and he's the one that clued me into this site. He said, when you're talking about debt, taking on debt for college, what you should always do is, if you have to do it, take on no more than 1 year's earnings, which is pretty smart.
It's a good rule.
Yeah. So if you're going to get out and be an engineer and make $80,000 a year, then $80,000 should be your limit. If you're going to be a puppet master and basically have to pay for the privilege, well, then you probably shouldn't take any debt on, and you shouldn't be surprised when you're in a useless major and nobody hires you. So
Well, there's another. If we have time to talk about this, there's another fairly recent development that I think holds a lot of promise. It's called the income share agreement. Instead of borrowing the money to pay for college, what the individual does is finds backers, or the backers may find him, who are willing to put up the money for him to go and get his degree, but in return for a share of his earnings after graduation. So, and Purdue has really been making big strides in this respect. If you want to go to Purdue and study engineering, there's a very good chance through the program that Mitch Daniels has helped to set up, you'll be able to find people who are willing to put up the money for you to get that engineering degree at Purdue, but then you'll pay them back over some number of years once you've gotten out into the marketplace. Now, that calculus interjects economic reality into the funding of higher education. People are not going to be putting up money for you to get an expensive degree from a college in puppeteering or probably gender studies or all these other things.
Yeah.
That for which there's little economic value. On the other hand, if you want to learn engineering or you want to learn accounting or something for which there is a real demand, and you apply yourself, you'll probably find backers who want to put up money to help finance your education.
Yeah.
If this catches on, and I hope that it does catch on, it seems to be a growing phenomenon. That also would pull the rug out from underneath this foolish program whereby the government just lends you limitless amounts of money to go and study whatever you feel like studying.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're going to be accountable to your investors, your benefactors, and hopefully they're going to mentor you as well, right?
Yes. And they'll be much more careful in saying, well, we want to see some results here. So the kid who thinks, oh, college, I'm just going to go have fun and be a party animal for the first couple of years, is likely to see that his income share agreement, the agreement will be cashiered because of his behavior.
Yeah.
So this is again a phenomenon that will build responsible people on both ends, responsible lending and responsible students.
Yeah. Hey, maybe microloans. There's a lot of innovative things, but the government has really shut out the innovation by their domination of the space.
Yeah. They took over the whole business of financing higher education and has slowed down the growth of much better and more sensible alternatives. Yeah,
exactly. Well, we really do appreciate you coming on here, John. Been an enlightening half hour. And
I've been glad to talk with you, Kerry, and I'd like to encourage your listeners to go to our website, jamesgmartin.center, and see what we have to say about the problems facing American higher education.
Yeah, and you should check it often. There's several articles every week or two. I catch an article on there.
We publish new stuff several times a week.
Yeah, I love reading it. It really gives you a different perspective. This is why Johnny can't graduate and get a job, and why Johnny is in hock up to his eyeballs with no hopes of ever repaying it. There's so many issues here, but you guys kind of take a free market view of it, and a real just a practical, pragmatic view of how do we solve these problems.
Well, I think that's a good way to put it, Kerry. And we challenge the conventional wisdom that higher ed is for everybody. It's not.
Yeah. Just like everybody shouldn't be a plumber or a mechanic or an HVAC repairman. Not everybody should go to college. My father always used to say it takes all kinds to make a world. Look, for me, it was college. For my kids, it was college. But that doesn't mean it's right for everyone. I remember a woman in high school, and my high school's graduation rate was like 99%. 99% went on to college. She was like the one that became a waitress. You know what? She was like a really happy person. So that's what she was supposed to do. Anyways, questions or comments for George or myself? We would love to hear your thoughts about these issues, about college. Is it for everyone? The email address is kl@kerrylutz.com. Twitter feed @KerryLutz. Facebook page is Financial Survival Network, as well as our home site, financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Visit it. Sign up for our free weekly newsletter. George, been a pleasure. We'll talk to you again real soon.
I hope so, Kerry. Thanks a lot.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.